Star Trek Phase 2 New Voyages, Episode 1 in Harm's Way. The very first episode of Star Trek New Voyages. Which is ironic because I literally just got done reviewing the pilot that the makers of New Voyages wish had never happened, and everyone who saw it wish it never happened because it was really bad. But like I said, I reviewed it. You can listen to the review on my channel. It's really bad, and I see why the makers of the show don't want the pilot to have happened, because it's really the only misstep they did. It's starting with this official episode 1 in Harm's Way. This show, this fan show, is starting to get really good. Their best episodes, of course, come later, but this is already a really good start. This is where they started to hire people in the writing who were already involved in Star Trek before, some really good guest actors that were on Star Trek before, and stories that are involved in the Star Trek timeline. So it really comes together as the kind of thing that Star Trek New Voyages wanted to be from the beginning, or Star Trek Phase 2 wanted to be from the beginning. There was always a bit of confusion about the official name of the show, Phase 2 on New Voyages, because they renamed it halfway through from New Voyages to Phase 2, and then they renamed it again to Phase 2 New Voyages. So there's always a bit of confusion, so forgive me if I say New Voyages sometimes. That's how I got to know them. And sometimes I'll say the official name, Phase 2 New Voyages. Anyway, here's where they started to really get into continuing the 5-year mission. But like I said, the really good episodes, they come later. This is not the best. It's a good start, but it's definitely not their best episode, because here's where the spoiler starts. I think all of you by now have seen Star Trek Discovery and have been confused by how completely convoluted their stories are, that everything is linked to everything in the most convoluted way. And this episode is kind of the same way, except the difference is that in Star Trek Discovery the convolution comes all in, you know, the old thing they tell you about writing, show, don't tell. In Star Trek Discovery they just tell you how the story is convoluted, and in Star Trek New Voyages this episode they actually show you the story. They don't actually say to you, care about this character, care about this story development, care about this, care about that. They don't tell you, they actually show you the actual story. They show you what is going on, but it's still completely... It's a time travel episode with the Guardian of Forever, and 100 things are kind of interlinked in time overlapping paradoxes. Like, they changed the timeline that Vulcan would never be part of the Federation, but because Mr. Spock was on the Guardian of Forever planet, he wasn't affected by it, but everybody from the Enterprise who meets him doesn't know him. Because and then they have to trust him because he's the Spock from the real timeline. He was actually supposed to be on the Enterprise, and on the Enterprise there's a Klingon first officer, John Carrison. My God, what a mispronunciation. John Carrigan as Karg makes his first appearance on New Voyages, and he's a recurring character, and he's really good. It's good that he's a recurring character because he's really cool. I'm starting to make my review as convoluted as the story. Let me backtrack to the beginning. Like, as I said, there's this really convoluted story about time travel. There's been an alteration in the timeline through the Guardian of Forever that caused the Doomsday Machine from the episode with the Doomsday Machine. Was that the title? I actually forgot the title. I need to look up the title. 1 second, I'll pause and look up in Memory Alpha. And yeah, sorry about that. I had to look it up if the episode about the Doomsday Machine was actually called the Doomsday Machine, but it is. They didn't have cool titles like Into the Forest I Go or Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad back in the day. It was actually called the Doomsday Machine. Anyway, there was a time alteration through the Guardian of Forever that made the Doomsday Machine not be beaten, and be multiplied instead, and the Doomsday Machines, they multiply and wage war against the whole universe, basically. And the Enterprise crew with First Officer Karg, the Klingon, needs to work together with Spock, who was protected from the time changes, to go back into the past to meet original Captain Decker, who flew into the Doomsday Machine in the episode The Doomsday Machine, and find him and find the solution. It's really convoluted. There's like a really convoluted time travel story, and time travels within time travels. It's a bit hard to follow, but it's really cool. It's really cerebral. Remember how Star Trek was first rejected for it being too cerebral, and this is a really cool cerebral show, but not in the convoluted way that Star Trek Discovery does it, that they tell you all the convolution, but they actually show how all the things fall together, like domino stones or domino bricks. I don't know what the appropriate word for domino is in English. It's my second language, but domino stones falling together and creating this convoluted story where everything falls in place, and it's really cool. And for the technical things, since the pilot, they really improved the CGI. It still looks really corny, but obviously it's not a big studio. The wiggling Doomsday Machines, I personally thought they were stupid. A lot of new Voyages fans liked them, and I personally thought they were stupid. They would have been much better if they were more like the original, and I'm pretty sure they had the technical abilities at New Voyages to do them like the original. Instead they made them wiggling as their own interpretation, and it didn't really work for me. I don't like them to be wiggling. It just looks stupid. And the acting improved, and John Carrigan obviously is a big improvement. Barbara Luna is a bit strange in this episode as a guest actress. She appears again in New Voyages in a later episode and makes a much better performance. She's a bit strange in this episode, but generally, for a fan series, the acting is a lot better than what you've been used to at this point in fan productions. It's a much higher level of quality. It's not Hollywood level quality, obviously. None of these people studied to be professional actors. They're amateurs, but it's really good. It really pulls you in. They managed to do a performance that pulls you in, and that is convincing, and that makes you do your willing suspension of disbelief, that you go into the story and believe that these people that you see on screen are the characters and not some geeks in a studio. It really pulls you in, and it really makes you suspend your disbelief, and that's all an actor can hope for, even an amateur actor, especially an amateur actor. I think that's a really good job, that it pulls you into the story, you suspend your disbelief and get into the story. And I guess the story being so convoluted that your mind is constantly busy trying to make heads and tails out of where you even are in the interlocking timeline changes, that it helps a bit to keep you distracted from a few technical deficiencies here and there due to it not being a big Hollywood production with a budget of no matter how many millions they use on Star Trek these days. So that really keeps you in. I was always in the story. I was never thinking, wow, these are some really pathetic basement-dwelling geeks trying to act a Star Trek episode. I was always, from beginning to end, in the story. And that is really the biggest compliment you can make a fan production done by amateurs who are not supported by a big studio, not supported by a big budget. That's really the biggest compliment you can make. I was always in the stories, in the story, in the characters. I was always suspending my disbelief. I was always believing what was going on screen was an actual Star Trek episode, and that's what made it so great. And that's what made it a good beginning to a great series. Even though it's by far not the best episode of Phase 2 New Voyages, it was a really good beginning because it was convincing from start to finish, and it really worked. And no matter how weird, brainiac, convoluted the story was, it engaged me the whole time, and it really worked. and marked the beginning of a really good show.